talk about it.
We are back on Morning Line. We were just talking during the break, the professor and I, about what next to touch on real quickly, and there's so much. Of course, the midterm election's coming up right now, and you wonder just what is going to happen with the Republicans, the House and the Senate, and there's been some races in Tennessee.
Sure.
There's going to be some for the Senate, for the governor. In Tennessee, of course, very strongly Republican right now, but you wonder with some of the candidates, the Democrats have some strong ones as well. What do you think? And what will the president be looking at? Obviously, can he help, or is he hurting some of these Republicans?
Well, I think the ones that he would have hurt are the ones who are retiring, and that's one of the things about this election. You've got a large number of Republicans who are retiring.
Well, the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, I mean that's the most noticeable.
He's not old enough to retire, really, if you know what I mean.
I believe the last number I saw was 49 Republicans in the House and Senate who are retiring.
Okay, and you know the power of incumbency. So even in strong Republican districts, there could be some challenges when you have two new candidates, right?
You can. And does it change the facts on the ground? Okay, how many of those districts were strongly Republican? How many of them were strongly Democrat? How many of them were just kind of like the purple,
kind
where
of
you have a real, you don't have a real strong history of one or the other in the last few elections. The predictions of a blue wave, similar to what the Republicans experienced in 2010, is that going to happen?
I just can't see that.
I don't see it happening either, because for one, though Trump has seemingly not a very high ceiling when it comes to personal approval, he also seems to have a very strong floor. And so I think his impact on a lot of those things is fairly minimal.
And isn't it true most presidents in that first midterm, you see some losses coming in their party? It's traditional.
Some. When you look at the things, it seems to be either large swings, or like you'll have 25, 30, 50, even 60 seats. We're going back towards like World War II, when you've got somebody running for a second term, or excuse me, who's a first term president. Or you have maybe zero. There's been a couple of cases like that. So it's like there's an average, but there's also a lot of variation within that. So I find it difficult to really say. I think, yes, he will lose some seats. Is there a good chance that they'll lose the majority in the House? I think yes, simply because it's a fairly small majority as it is, 25 seats or so. In the Senate, that's one where it's kind of hard to read, because only 1/3 of the Senate seats are up for election, but the majority of them are Democratic seats. So how many of those Democrats are vulnerable? The Republicans may not be in a position to really pick up much. They might could pick up 2 or 3 seats, or they might could lose 2 or 3 seats. But in the end, it's all about the net. But overall, what's really driving what might happen this time, you got to worry about turnout. Democrats are very motivated, but can they get their whole coalition to turn out for this? Republicans are a little bit mixed, because they've been discouraged by the performance of the party on various issues since Trump got into office. Are they excited about Trump himself? The thing is, there's a lot of things that can happen between now and November. There's a lot of things coming up. Okay, the tax cuts, did they provide something of a headwind? Certainly, there was some effect. The economy's doing pretty well. But on the other hand, you're looking at some really tough issues that people are dealing with. Is North Korea going to play a role in this? Is Syria going to play a role in this? Is NAFTA, which is kind of under the radar right now, but a lot of things have happened in the last year with those negotiations.
Will the tariffs play a role?
The tariffs might.
See, I wonder about the tariffs. It's interesting. Donald Trump is someone, even when he was elected, I'm like, I know he's elected as a Republican, and he definitely is more Republican than Democrat in what we've seen, but I always thought he kind of was unto himself in a way. And this tariff, I understand where he's coming from, but that is actually, it seems, damaging, potentially, many of the people who voted for him in the heartland, the farmers and people like that, in terms of the high cost of pork and some of these, and yet he's doing it because he believes it, but I think that could be hurtful for him.
Well, there's 2 aspects of that may minimize that kind of thinking. One is, China is an importer of food. We are an exporter. Okay, so when they put tariffs on something, certainly it drives the price up, but it just means that becomes cheaper for other countries to buy. our trade is not just with
That's true.
With
Right, of
China.
course.
I mean, South America, we trade with them. We trade with Europe. We trade with, Japan and all these other places.
But China's a biggie, though, isn't it? I mean, will these other
China is a big one.
Countries pick up the slack?
But when you're looking at the overall economy, exports and imports, we run a deficit. Okay, but it's a fairly small portion of the overall economy. Because when you include consumption and investment and government spending, and then you throw in exports and imports, you're talking about, I think, around 12, 15% of the economy at the most. Now, that's enough to send us to really sort of level off the growth we can expect. But the numbers coming out of the Congressional Budget Office and even independent authorities is that growth for the next year and even in 2019 is as strong or stronger than it's been for the past year and a half.
Yeah, and you can always, attribute it to a wide range of things, and at the very least, you can say the president hasn't messed up what maybe was already on the rails going that way.
Sure.
But ultimately, when it comes to election time, there's all these issues that affect, and a lot of people have issues. But I've always believed, and you go back, people vote their pocketbooks ultimately above all else. That doesn't mean you don't care about anything else. Don't get me wrong. But if you're doing well financially and you feel things are going well, and not everyone is, some are, you're gonna, that's what you think. If you're not voting for the person. If it is, hey, you're gonna say, I want to keep this rolling.
Well, and the thing is, people are still concerned about the economy.
Sure.
They wonder about
rates
because, it even goes back to the insecurity from 2008 when we had the very serious recession, and so people still have that in their minds. When people feel a little bit more secure, when they haven't had to worry about their jobs, when they haven't had to worry about opportunities and things like that, don't have to worry about the future, then they start to prioritize those other things, cultural things and things like that.
Oh, I see.
Social issues, unless they just don't worry about the economy at all. Okay, there are people who simply say, you know what, the economy will take care of itself, or they just don't feel like they're going to get ahead regardless, so they care about other things.
These other issues,
because there are one-issue voters. Okay, that's that's
you're right.
Second Amendment voters,
yeah.
Abortion, and 500,000 other things.
I'm glad you mentioned this as we wrap things up, and this is something obviously, especially folks here, Tennessee's a Second Amendment state, you know that,
yes.
But the gun control issue, and I wonder politically speaking, after some of these mass shootings and some of these students organizing the rallies and all this, and who knows what kind of legs that, I heard people say, it's great that these young people are becoming active, whatever the cause. But whether you agree, if you disagree with them, don't worry about it because they don't vote. They might like the rally and stuff, but when it comes time to go to the polls, a lot of these young folks, and maybe it's going to change, but that's the fact. They can rally all they want. If they don't show up to vote, well, that's on them, and what they want's not going to happen.
Well, and it hasn't seemed to really work for pushing things away from Republicans towards Democrats. What they call the generic ballot, where somebody's going to say, are you going to vote Republican or Democrat in November 2018? That gap is actually shortened in favor of the Republicans. It used to be a very wide gap for the Democrats. Now it's more narrow. So gun control has not shifted people away from the Republicans. It may have actually motivated people who are a little bit iffy. Not to say it's only about gun control, but gun control has not been a vote shifter in this.
Yeah, it's not a vote shifting. So if you were going to say the biggest issues for vote shifting might be what?
Well, I mean, the economy. Is it going to continue on the way it's going to go? And then big issues like North Korea,
immigration
and NAFTA. Immigration's always there because immigration gets into so many different things for people. It gets into crime, it gets into jobs, it gets into just who we are as a country. It's hugely symbolic. Okay, that's also a big part of this. And I think that immigration, it depends on what gets done. Is Trump going to push for a wall?
I was going to say, that was his big selling point. And when we keep going, and he's realizing, it's hard, and Mexico's supposed to pay for it, right?
Well, I mean, if he can say, I got Mexico to renegotiate NAFTA to such an extent to where now it's a big deal for us, and immigration has been cut maybe by how many, illegal immigration has been cut by how many?
It already has been. There's not as many coming across as there once were, that's for sure.
So, that's what enforcement comes from.
Yeah, well, and they know,
nobody wants to come here if they think, well, I'm going to run the risk of being thrown back. And arrested or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can really make the argument that, you really don't need a wall. It's not like they're flooding over the border right now because you don't have the flow as much. And so if you can leverage that to get something else like a better deal on NAFTA, right?
Yeah, and I think
something
that's
like
what
that
he's
could
done.
happen. But I mean, he did promise. I mean, and who knows? Voters can be fickle, and politicians can change their minds. But that was his big. That got the Trump campaign rolling from the very beginning, back when he was running, was that wall issue. And you know, that was his first biggie, and it had legs.
It does, and I think there's still some possibility that some version of heightened security is certainly going to be there.
And there's already stuff down there.
There's already stuff down there, but how well is it being enforced? How well is it being maintained? Those are the kind of things that...
well, the National Guard's heading that way now, right?
Yeah,
in some states.
And that may be only symbolic, because it's not a huge number of people, but those are probably very capable people. Okay? It doesn't take a whole lot of people to wholly watch that thing. I mean, it's not like ICE and the Customs and Border Patrol people. There's like a million of them down there just kind of manning the towers along the thing. There's a lot of people for what really is a long border.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. I think you're right about it being symbolic anyway. I mean, do we really need the National Guard down there? Are they flowing over to that degree that you want to send the National Guard down there? I mean, originally he was calling for the military, which was absurd. Okay, but the National Guard, I mean, you can do that. But I just am trying to get a handle on whether or not the flow is that great coming across. I just don't think it's anywhere close to what it once was.
Well, think about where he got the idea from. Both Bush and Obama did the same thing.
No, yeah, when it's needed. It just seems like it's gotten better.
Well, I mean, it depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish, because things are pretty rough down in Mexico right now. I mean, they're going through a national election, and you're seeing assassinations of candidates and things like that. And we're talking about the drug cartels are still active and all that kind of stuff. It's a terrible situation for the population down there, and they're desperate. I mean, that's why you have basically a socialist candidate who actually may make things worse, but he's promising things and he's different than what they've already had.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Mexico's in a tough situation right now. I really do sort of feel sorry for Mexico right now.
I'm with you. So does that make it easier to make a deal with them then?
Certainly.
That's the whole idea.
Because they're so dependent on us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just about trade with us. It's the remunerations from people who are here sending money back to Mexico. That is a huge amount of money. It's a big part of their economy. It's bigger than their oil trade.
Really? The money from the folks that are here that are sending American dollars back into Mexico?
And it's increased immense amounts in the last, year or so.
Earn anything down there. But, yeah, it's scary, even for tourists in this country. Going to Mexico, I'm afraid I'll pass.
Yeah.
And there's some beautiful places down there, but I ain't going.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Not just right now. Professor, as always, that was a fun conversation. Interesting stuff. I appreciate you coming on. It's nice to see you again.
Thanks for the invitation.
Take care over there at Lipscomb, and we'll see you again soon. How about that?
Thanks, good, Nick.
We'll take a break. We'll be back to wrap things up right after this. Stay with us.